Ladies and gentlemen, it's been all fun and games up until now. Now it's time to get serious. Because I got to do my first raids in FF. Oh my god, it was time to step into raiding. So, as you guys will be aware, if you're not and you're following along because you've no idea about Final Fantasy XIV, it was very interesting that they do what World of Warcraft would do, which is throw in some of the bigger quests and story names into some simple story-based combat. I mean, in the last video, we talked about Westwind Point and how that was like very simple and people built it up to be a big thing. But then I took a quest which opened something called Extreme. And I got to learning then that this is the real shit. This is the real shit. So very similar to most MMOs, there's various tiers of difficulty as you go through raiding. I had heard of Savage. Savage is what I covered while doing the sort of can I work out what the raid bosses are doing videos that you guys found very popular. And I wasn't sure what Extreme was. So, again, we're always doing this weird thing. And now this has really opened my eyes. We're always trying to compare it to World of Warcraft or something like that. It's like, okay, so it's like heroic, but maybe slightly easier. Puggable, sometimes. Maybe you're going to have to do some progress rating on it. And so far, I hadn't actually, like, failed to do any piece of content in Final Fantasy. It had all been very much a single-player, mostly driven story. So it was time to face the primals that I'd already faced, but this time in the extreme difficulty. So we roped in some players from the stream and some friends of mine. And the great thing is, I think most people could probably relate to this, is a hell of a lot of players have boosted. Either not like physically by paying to boost, but boosted up to leveling through the story as quickly as possible and skipped over the end of expansion content because they moved straight or as quickly as possible into the next expansion. So in my case, that would be Heavensward. And all the way leading to this point, this is a good context for this, I've been getting blasted with warnings that as soon as I finished A Realm Reborn, which we did in the last video, that the next part before we reach the next expansion, which would be Heavensward, is awful, like a real drag. Even to the point where some members of my team were like, you might want to do this off stream so you can kind of click through the story and just get it done because it is the worst part of it. Several of my friends quit during this period of time, and that's for a number of reasons, and I'm not going to try and label them all, but there's definitely a point where you stop gaining like relevant amounts of experience. Like your character growth in terms of levels, it massively slows down. And the way Final Fantasy works is it requires you to complete this story content before it will allow you to go forward into the next expansion. So you have to get through it for very little experience. And if you're trying to get through it quickly because you want to just progress, you're going to be skipping through it and going through it and all those kinds of things. Or frankly, you just want to get on with the next piece of content. I decided to take a break and say, hey, wait a minute, wait. I want to see what's here. I've been loving this story so far. I've been loving all the content so far, and I really want to find out what's going on. And I want to play out the story with the audience, which I asked the question. I did put the vote to the audience. Like, I can skip through this off stream and just kind of click through it and get done. Or do you want to play through it? And I'm like, no, let's play through it. Let's see where it's going. It's going to be a drag, but we'll go through it together as a community. We'll have a giggle. We'll have some fun. It's been amazing. Absolutely amazing so far. So first thing, of course, was the raid content. Similar as if you were transitioning from Vanilla World of Warcraft into the Burning Crusade, at the end of Vanilla World of Warcraft, there's a whole bunch of content. Or you can just go through the Dark Portal and carry on before you even hit level 60, right? Most people can relate to that. So at the end of A Realm Reborn, there's the raid content that was there for the people who played that before Heavensward, the next expansion, came out. And I wanted to try that out. Now, I haven't done what's called the coils yet. I haven't unlocked it. But what I did find was a couple of things. First of all was the extremes. This is where it steps up a little bit and you kind of want some coordination. You need to plan it out. And this was fucking fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And most importantly, it was the point where I really realized World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy in terms of these systems are absolutely not comparable at all. And a lot of people have said that to me in the past and I'm like, how can that be? They're both fantasy driven, third person, click spell, RPG MMOs. Like, they're almost identical. If you look to them, like, from a screenshot to screenshot, it's like you can see where the elements of each game just can perfectly align in each way. So what are you saying that they're not comparable? And people are always asking that same question. Well, what's heroic difficulty? What's mythic difficulty, right? Is it extreme heroic? Is this? And at this point, it really dawned on me in pure terms. Now, I actually got to do progress rating, which is my heart and soul. So I had a blast with this. That they're not comparable at all. So I want to put some more deeper meaning into that because I think people think that's a cop-out, but it's not. Final Fantasy's gameplay does not work like World of Warcraft. It's slower, it's more methodical, but it has more of a nuance into the impact of each spell. When you cast a spell in Final Fantasy, you really need to make sure you're casting the right spell, otherwise it really throws you out of whack, especially on the character I'm playing. In World of Warcraft, it's not really the case for that at all in terms of basic gameplay. You can actually make several mistakes in WoW and drop your performance by tiny amounts for the most part, and then you can pick it up again later. You can make some major blunders, but for the most part, outside of big cooldowns, you can do whatever the hell you want and you'll be fine. You can even stop attacking in some cases and barely lose out. Final Fantasy is not like that. Especially if you've got a lot of movement going on, where you really need to think about what you're going to be casting at each end. It's also a massive spectacle. And one thing I really realized, like a visual spectacle, is Final Fantasy is fully aware of how its gameplay works and is not trying to duplicate what World of Warcraft does, because the World of Warcraft's raid content only really works in the realm of World of Warcraft. It doesn't work over here, so they don't try to mimic it. And this is something we see MMOs fail at all the time, is they try and duplicate what's worked in the past in their own way by really forcing it, but their game doesn't really work that way. And therefore, it doesn't work, or it just feels like a mediocre comparison or a poor copy of what's going on. And that's not what FF went with. Instead, it's very much a dance. Now, I was worried about this because I don't particularly like dance fights. But in fact, I don't like dance fights in the context of the gameplay of World of Warcraft. Right? That has a much more reactive and dynamic gameplay system. This doesn't. Therefore, the dance makes much more sense because there's lots of optimization to do in between the dances to try and do yourself any favors and get pushing ahead. So, the first thing I did, I believe, was either Titan or Garuda, which were eye-opening experience. Like, I had an absolute blast for that, and then went on to do something horrifying that I didn't expect at all. And nobody, again, thanks to the thousands and thousands of people who watch this daily, no one warned me about King Moogle the 12th, which is when it went full-on creep show, scared me to death. Oh god, all of them at once? Don't like it. But at the same time, put in this fast-paced, up-tempo music that ramps up as the fight goes on. All these cute, innocent little lads that are actually just terrifying, horrible creatures that are trying to rip you apart. And going into that was amazing. And nothing so far besides Ifrit has taken more than a couple of hours to kill. And I still have some more to do, including Extreme Ultimate Weapon. But opening this up has been such an eye-opening experience to see how they've used their gameplay rules in order to match it to their rating to make a compelling and engaging fight. And I totally get now, when I've been talking to the Echo Boys, or of course Limit have been doing the same thing, and some other streamer friends, of like, it's really good. It's not World of Warcraft, but that doesn't mean it's like, it's not World of Warcraft, but it's good. It's not that. It's like, it's really good because it works perfectly within the confines of what you're dealing with in FF. And therefore, you're getting a totally different experience. It is several players versus a giant raid boss, but it's an entirely different experience. And that eye-opening moment for me after the first boss, which I think was Garuda, was really sort of monumental to me. Because for the longest time, I've been doing the same thing, is looking at raw statistics. And I feel like such a moron now as well. Because I would look at things like, well, how long did it take the Final Fantasy guilds to kill their hardest boss compared to the World of Warcraft hardest boss? So World of Warcraft is harder, right? Instead, what you realize is you're kind of that guy who's like, which boss lasted the longest? And you see these lists all the time, and it's like, well, Cthulhu lasted 400. Yeah, it was fucking broken, dude. Like, what are you talking about? Black Temple was up for a really long time, but that's because we had, like, it was open while there was various raid tiers going. Like, it makes no sense. You just stop. And I feel like that guy now, which is like, that's just stupid. You're comparing apples to oranges, which makes no sense. And to have that experience has been really, really enlightening and super fun, and now I'm just hyped for everything else. I'm super hyped. I keep setting up days. And in fact, I'm recording this as I'm going to London, and I'm going to be playing on a stage at EGX 2021, and I'm not sure what I'm playing, but I'm hoping to put a Final Fantasy Extreme Raid up on the stage for a lot of people to see in the live audience, and we'll see how that plays out over this weekend. On top of that, though, coming back to other content is, as I was working through the post-ARR content, which has obviously got patches and things built into it, one of the things that opens up with the Crystal Tower, and this was my first experience of the Alliance Raid. So, the Extreme Raids are like 8 players, but the Alliance Raids are 24. And this was, again, another eye-opening experience. I had no idea how this would work, where you're fighting much more colossal battles. Now, they are more of a visual spectacle than a challenge, because they're like story-driven, right? For the most part, it's story-driven content, so it's not overly difficult. It's a big visual spectacle. You can only imagine Final Fantasy with all graphics turned up, what it looks like with 24 players casting all this stuff. And for the most part, I will admit, some things were just confusing to try and figure out mechanically because there's just so much happening, but it's really fun at the same time because there's so much happening and you're only there once. So, I also didn't realize that the way they worked it is that, yes, there are 3 groups of 8, which is, 8 is the standard raid comp, and you can't really interact with the other players, such as your abilities that grip you and things like that. They are a technically different group, and I really liked how they utilized that in those fights to divide the raid up into 3 separate elements to go and deal with their own individual elements. Or they had a boss that had several mechanics. It's like, right, Group 3, you're going to deal with this. Group 2, you need to deal with this. Group 1, you need to deal with this. What we don't want is people trying to all join in and jobs not getting done and all that, and I really enjoyed that. As simple as it was and as quick as it was to do, that was super fun as well. I'm moving now after this really eye-opening and wondrous experience. I cannot wait to do the next extremes. But right now, another change is happening. Is this post-ARR combat, ARR story stuff that people were really kind of warning me about has been a blast so far. And as of today, as of recording this, you can see where the influx of cash and popularity of the game has come in. And the voice acting just changed. Like, certain voice actors just disappeared and characters had new voice acting. And the cutscenes became far more interactive and enjoyable and action-packed rather than the standard stand around and everyone nod at each other. There's still elements of that, but you can see how the game is progressing now. Now, I want to see how that plays out, because on the one part, it was kind of jarring. The first cutscene I saw like this had people doing flips and much more like an anime style thing, and I was like, okay, this almost feels like a totally different game. And what direction they're going to go in, now they have the finances and the tools in order to push that, as to how wacky that will get, and whether or not, and I mean this seriously, this will put me off the game. If it goes really, really into the more anime style, that might be off-putting to me. I'm not saying it's going to be, but it might be, compared to the more comical and gamey nature that I had earlier on. But I'm only saying that after just seeing this cutscene and being very what is happening? This feels like a Bayonetta game at this point. So that's going to be interesting for me to see, and I'll keep you posted as that goes. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I was just blown away by all of these. Even the horror that is King Moogle Mog the 12th took me by surprise, but it was amazing. And I'm not feeling this horror that came with the post-ARR combat. And in fact, what's been interesting is the voice acting started to change. We've had weird cutscenes. And the whole shape of the game, now that it seems to have picked up momentum and they definitely got more money in, is changing. And I'm really wondering how that's going to play out. Thank you again, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.